go ahead and get started. I think we have a few other people who had signed up, and maybe they'll join us and maybe they won't. We'll see. So glad everybody could be here. So, you know, watching how this COVID situation has evolved emotionally for people has been quite a trip. You know, everybody's experiencing it in some ways similarly, in some ways differently. In the very beginning, almost universally, there was incredible anxiety about contagion. And now there's the people who are more vulnerable who still have some of that fear, and some people who are vulnerable who have decided that it's not a real thing. And right, we're kind of seeing it across, you know, sort of the gamut of responses. So we have that. The thing that I keep hearing from people is the way that it is permanent, that what they're thinking is that it's permanently changing the way we're living our lives. And for some of us, that may or may not be true, you know, but for Gail, like you're retiring, that's a permanent change in your life. And of course, not, you know, necessarily directly correlated. My dog is in the background. My kids are, you know, teenagers rambling around the house. We're just going to have to deal with ambient noise. Sorry. But for a lot of folks now, some of the things they're dealing with is just the exhaustion and the fatigue of living the way we are, of being separated from the people who matter to us, not knowing when or how we're going to be able to return to the things that we're really looking forward to. You know, a lot of this is the stuff. So it's more like, well, okay, so at the beginning I was really scared, some folks will say. Now it's like, I'm so sick of this, or I'm tired of it, or, you know, when are we going to get to have our lives back? What is this going to mean? It's the uncertainty. We've kind of adapted to this new normal of either having to be really anxious, having to be really careful, having to be separated. So it's showing up as anxiety, of course, depression, of course. People are struggling with food and alcohol and boredom and motivation. Motivation is a big one. Probably, I would say, the number one issue that I'm hearing. You know, there is the anxiety and the worry about what this means, people who have lost their jobs, you know, businesses that are struggling, all of these things. But also motivation is a biggie. What would any of you say are you wishing could be different?
One of the things I've been doing is reaching out to friends, family, and chamber members, and talking with them and listening to them. It runs the gamut, as you mentioned, but people who want to get back to work at all costs, people who are afraid to go back to work, people who feel like it's a hoax, which I have to say is surprising, and just listening to the various ways that people are coping. And I have some people who've actually told me that they wish they could get the virus just so they can have antibodies, and that they feel like they would be okay if they got it. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, I've heard people say all of those things too. So, right, so part of it is, and again, this is for chamber, kind of a chamber event. So, right, so work-related stress, getting back to work, how are people going to do that? How do we manage the tension between needing to show back up for work and the concern that something could happen, that you could get sick or you could bring the virus to somebody that you care about? So that is a big tension that you're hearing from chamber members or from family members.
Right.
Yeah. For people who have to go back, having sort of, and I hate to use this word, I don't have better ones, but kind of quick, sneaky ways of regulating your nervous system activation are really important. I don't know about any of you, but I think for most of us, we've been in a bit of an emergency response state in our systems, in our nervous systems. Has anybody felt that? Some fight, flight, difficulty with sleeping, worry, anxiety, you know, feeling some collapse. I was on a group, I belong to a group of women business owners, and there's probably about a dozen of us. And we were talking, I mean, we were just talking about how much we're sweating throughout the day. You know, as you're trying to, it's like, really, I never thought of myself as a sweater, but you know, that's all nervous system activation, right? Palms are sweating, other places are sweating. And so this is kind of unprecedented, right? Because in human relationships, we use the mirror neurons in our head. We use portions of our brain when we're in a calm state to do something called co-regulating. Has anybody heard of that, co-regulating? With you. So what co-regulating means, if you think about it, and you know, if you've had babies, you might have seen this, or you've been around babies. Well, all of us were babies, but we don't remember it. But it's where, you know, the parent is, or the caretaker is interacting with the baby or the child. I mean, you can see this with people of all ages, senior citizens too, when you're trying to interact with them. Where your nervous system state is, if you're in a calm nervous system state, that state is called social engagement. And it's called social engagement for a reason, right? It's a state where our nervous system is out of an emergency response state. We're not doing the sweating. We're not feeling so anxious, right? We're not just under fight or flight and kind of bouncing between the two, right? We're in a state of nervous system regulation. And when we're in that state of nervous system regulation, we feel more comfortable interacting with other people, right? Because we have, right, when you're in an emergency response state, whether you realize it or not, it's like you have a radar dish on the top of your head that's picking up space junk and all kinds of other stuff about what's in the environment around you, right? So if you have somebody who's in this state where they're feeling anxious and you have to go back into an environment where you're dealing with other people who are anxious, one of the natural outcomes of that is more misunderstanding, more conflict, right? More opportunities for things to go a direction that you don't want them to go. Why? Well, our emotional centers of our brain and the thinking centers of our brain, or your limbic system and your prefrontal cortex, you know, whatever, those systems are, I don't want to use the word designed because I don't know. Somehow they have come to function in counterbalance with each other. So when one goes up, one goes down. So for example, to illustrate what it's like when you get into an emergency response, you know, I have teenagers and we have had lots of talks about you are not looking at your phone when you step into the street, right? Like bad plan. And I've had 2 clients who have lost family members who stepped into the street looking to their phone. And, you know, I mean, it's a serious thing. Anyway, but just to illustrate. So let's say I'm doing this, you know, I forget my own rule. Nobody's harping at me. So I step into the street and I'm looking at my phone and, you know, I think the world is kind of watching out for me. I'm not really paying attention. If all of a sudden out of my peripheral vision, I see that there's a bus, I grew up in the city. I see that there's a bus barreling toward me, a CTA bus. And if my thinking centers of my brain were running the show, what would happen is I would pick up my head and I would look at that bus and I would think, well, if I jump forward, I have about 3.2 seconds to get out. If I go back, by the time I'm done with my math here about is it better to go forward, I'm flat, right? That's it, right? So the survival centers of the brain operate in such a way that our thinking centers of our brain are going to dim when we're in an emergency response state. So if I were to do a PET scan of the bulk of us right now, especially in the beginning of this whole situation, but even now, we have moments where the thinking parts of our brain are not as available to us. People are talking about feeling foggy, unmotivated, right? They're having a hard time tracking. Reading isn't as easy. Meditating, yoga, all of these things are harder to do when we're in that emergency response state. And guess what else happens? More conflict, more misunderstandings. Because guess what? If you need your prefrontal cortex to sort through all of that and it's not as available, your emotional part of your brain, the emotional centers of the brain are running the show, right? So now we have people who are going back to work because they have to, they need a job, we need income. They're having to show up in places that they would prefer not to. And as they're going back into those places, they're probably not going to go in that nice, calm state. So for managers in particular, to understand that your employees, the people around you, you may be feeling tense, but guess what? The people around you are going to be feeling really tense too. And you're probably going to see that come out in their performance. So how can we support people in that? And of course, the low-hanging fruit in the best of all worlds is that we can do something like provide people with enough space and enough masks and, you know, all of the gear that they need so that they can, you know, be as safe as they can. But regardless of that, I mean, we've had people working through this all along who are having a lot of anxiety and who are getting sick and seeing people around them getting sick, right? And so what's happening, right? You're seeing there's more people who are having these kinds of conflicts. So if managers can encourage people, look, why don't you go take a few minutes, go take some breaths, go get a cup of tea, you know, let's see if we can offer things for staff that don't always include caffeine and sugar, right? We're great in our office. Our admin staff loads us up with all kinds of things that have sugar and caffeine. And I'm like, do you think, I appreciate it, but could we please get like green tea or something, you know, chamomile maybe, or, you know, nuts that don't have sugar or whatever. Trying to encourage people to really be aware of their systems and knowing that it's going to take some work to not get into these conflicts, to not get into misunderstandings. So that would be one way, I think, in businesses that they can be approaching this, is for the managers to be very mindful about how people's nervous systems are going to respond. There's nothing you can necessarily do, but we can be aware of each other. And, you know, it's important to give people more of a pass right now, to assume, and I talk to couples about this constantly, and I see a lot of couples in therapy. Ruth, I suspect you've seen this too, but what happens is people will say, you know, they assume that the other person has ill intention. You know, they're just being rude. They just don't want to listen. They just don't care. Or employers will feel that about their staff. Well, they're late. They're not really invested, not understanding that, guess what, when you're in that fight or flight state, that yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. If we can be more aware of that, everybody is struggling right now. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be normal. I think that's just kind of normalizing it and giving people some tools, taking breaks, walking away, taking some breaths, making sure you don't add things to your system that are going to ramp up that anxiety. I don't know about you, but I love my morning caffeine. Well, I've had to really cut it back, you know, unless I want to be sweating all day long. So those are some of the basic things for businesses. And I just recently inherited two therapists, so yay for us, who were working in practices where the practice owner was insisting that they go back and not wear masks. And, you know, I mean, things that these folks just felt really scary. And yes, I mean, people who are concerned about contagion, who don't want to have to go back, but have to, they don't have any say-so about whether or not their supervisor is going to be kind or considerate or provide them with what's appropriate. So they have, what I've been really encouraging people to do and what we've been practicing is how they can manage their own, for lack of better words, nervous system activation, anxiety as they're doing this. So that's where things like the deep breathing exercises before going into work at regular intervals, you know, all these things that are kind of sneaky nervous system hacks. Being able to do that belly breathing where you imagine that you're filling a balloon and expand, you know, and blowing the air back out immediately drops people out of that fight or flight. Immediately. It's one of the best things you can do. So you breathe in deeply and you breathe back out. It's all brain science, right? So if you start to notice yourself going up like this, your supervisor may not care. The shop owner wants you just to be, you know, chop, chop, let's make sales. We've lost a lot of income here. So she's going to have to be on, and I don't know if they're allowing her to wear a mask or not, but for her, being able to do something like that is great. Right? Just the breathing is a huge nervous system hack. So is what we call grounding. So it's where she might be standing somewhere. These are things people can do at their desk or in a workplace. If she's standing at a cash register or you're sitting at a desk, and really you're just kind of going back and forth between your feet, right? And what you're doing is you're reminding your nervous system, because you're not running. Anything you do that reminds your system or cues your system to think that you're in danger will ramp up that fight or flight response, right? So for example, if you are in a dangerous situation and you have to flee, right? Your breath is going to get really shallow. It'll come right up to about here, right? And you'll be breathing quickly and shallowly. Your heart's going to be pumping more quickly, and you're going to, your body is flooded with stress hormones to help you get out of there, right? So what the back and forth does is it's giving a little bit of nervous system input rather than sitting, kind of frozen. You're giving your nervous system some input, but it's not running. So as you're breathing, and everything that we tell ourselves matters. So if you're saying to yourself while you're doing this back and forth, I'm just standing here, I'm just at the counter, everything's okay, and you start looking around, have people identify, what do you see? You don't have to say it out loud. Again, it's getting your prefrontal cortex online. All these things get you out of that emergency response into your prefrontal cortex. So it might be, if you work in a cafe, it might be, I see the bags of coffee, I see the pastries, but you're just saying it inside of yourself. Because once we start naming things, that's our prefrontal cortex having to come into play. So those are some things people can do, and nobody even has to know that they're doing it. Now, they may be doing it several times a day. Yeah, Gail.
Well, I wanted the actual physical movement. Are you just swaying, or are you actually lifting your foot up like a lizard on a hot thing?
Either actually works. You can be swaying, because what you're doing, the actual thing that's happening is you're doing what's called crossing the midline. Because our brain is lateralized. So anything that helps you do that. You can tap with your hands on the counter in front of you. People look like you look like you're being a little musical. But all of that just causes your brain to fire right brain, left brain, right brain, left brain. So, some people need more input. It depends on how activated you are. So you can be, picking your feet up and setting them down, or you can sway back and forth. It really depends on what your system needs. And again, none of these does anybody have to know you're doing anything but, swaying or tapping, or, nobody knows really what you're doing. So does that give you a couple of things, Anne, to?
Yes, definitely. And then I don't know if I mentioned, how can we positively get people to try to have a respectful conversation and step into the other people's shoes?
Yeah. So that's a great one. There's great books that nobody has time to read right now. There's Crucial Conversations, and there's lots of good books on how to do this kind of communication. But what I would suggest, we rarely go wrong when we use I. When I come from a statement of I feel more comfortable, and I always try to keep it in the positive versus I am uncomfortable, right? Because right away, you think of this, we're talking about the baby and how people in your nervous systems, your nervous system and mine, if we're in a room together or even on this call, we're always trying to sync up. This is just what nervous systems do. It's how we read the environment to see if we're safe, right? So our language matters. When I start using negative language, your brain is going to pick up on that and have a response. So I will speak about myself, right? And I'm having to do this in my life too, with teenagers. I would really prefer you not, that's not the conversation we have, but, you're not, you can imagine. But it would be something like, I'm more comfortable when I have my mask on. I feel like I can interact with customers better. I feel more calm. I would really appreciate it. And these are words that are really potent for people. I would really appreciate it if you would allow me the opportunity, or if you would join me, right? Invitational language. I would so appreciate it because people's brains want to take care of other people, believe it or not, most people. So being able to ask somebody, but you're just speaking from yourself and you might be inviting them along, but you never use the word you. You're never critical. You're not saying something in the negative. I would just appreciate it if we could do it this way. Could we consider that? It would really mean a lot to me, right? I would feel so much better and so much safer. And maybe our customers would too. Maybe our clients would too. Does that sort of?
That is perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great. I'm glad. Yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky. But you know, once I learned about this neuroscience, it really makes so much sense about why we respond the way we do to people. So great.
Have you ever used, or do you use an app on your phone? I've seen that Calm app with the rain coming down on TV. I've not downloaded it, and it's free, but I don't know how effective it would be. Although every time I see it on the TV, I look up and I breathe.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pleasant sound.
Yeah.
I've used it to help me sleep, like before
Is that
bed.
it? Is that it? Is that Calm?
This is Calm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can hear the birds. Little bird break. Yes.
Okay.
So to your question, I love this app. I recommend it to people all the time. It can be like, it's $80 a year typically. Right now it's free. So thank you to the Calm people. And as I have pulled up this guy's stuff, his name is Jeff Warren. And it looks a bit like that. I know it's hard to see, but
Goodness.
yeah, right. He's actually laying on a dock, kind of, you know, with headphones on, looking really zen. He is a biker, motorcycle rider, was really kind of a rough and tumble guy, drank a lot, you know, would get into brawls with people. And then he started he needed to find a way to calm himself down because he really had an anger problem. And anger management, you know, again, it's a nervous system state. People are living too close to or in fight or flight all the time. So something happens and they're like, well, you know, same thing. Or people who get super avoidant, you're living right in that fight or flight state, or freeze, where people aren't like, you know, it's not like freeze tag when we were kids, you know. Freeze is more of a collapse, right? So you're still talking, you have no energy, nothing, right? That's more of a freeze state. Anyway, so this guy, Jeff Warren, was in fight or flight a lot of the time. So he started taking up meditation and thought it was complete hooey. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that, like, meditation, you know, I don't want to do it. My mind goes all over the place. It's not for me. I don't want to sit still. So he leads you through, I don't know, it's like 30 weeks of how to do it from like a regular person's perspective. So his course is wonderful. There's for sleep, for those of you who are waking up at night, either because we're middle-aged or because we're struggling. This is something that they have just a whole library of brief meditations specifically to help people get back to sleep. There's sleep stories, there's music. Another one that I really like, and boy, Calm had been, I think if you're trying to learn how to do meditation, and again, I have never been a sit on a pillow meditator. It's not for me. If people do it, I love it. That's great. It's not for me. I'm more of a listening to a story, somebody kind of guiding me through some breathing exercises or some muscle tensing and releasing. All of those things I'm really for. You know, I think there's lots of ways to do it that actually work. There's no requirement that your mind be blank or calm, because whose is, right? It's the practice of noticing when you're not and coming back to whatever your grounding point is, whether it's your breath, whether it's using some sense. Maybe it's something you hear, maybe it's something you smell in the air. Maybe, you know, some people do it with aromatherapy. So they'll have some lavender or something poofing in the air, and that's their grounding point. When they find their brain going off in some thoughts, They'll come back to what they smell, because that's easier than going back to the breath all the time. Some people hyperventilate, so you have to kind of figure out what's going to work for you. Another one that I really like is Insight Timer, also free. The guy who developed it has released it for a year for free. And there's the amount of content on this app is unbelievable. Again, they have guided meditations, guided courses. They have sleep apps or sleep meditation, sleep music. There's like a podcast about something. So you can either learn and get information. You can try to do a meditation. You can listen to music. You can hear a story. It's really, I think we have to try these things out because everybody's system is different. And what yours needs and what mine need are different. So theirs is great. And if you, this guy, his name is Russell Brand. Does anybody know who Russell Brand is? He's an actor. Oh, wait, no, that's terrible. I lost it. But there's this picture of him that looks a little bit like a little Charles Manson-ish. But
yeah, it does.
It's very like, it's Finding Calm and Serenity with Charles Manson. But it's really good. And
the name of it is Insight, INSIGHT.
Insight, yeah, INSIGHT
Timer.
Timer.
Okay.
And originally it's because they had timed meditations that you would do with your little bowl. You're seeing the reflection back, but that's how the concept started, and then the content has really built. So these are two that I think they're free. There's tons of content. There's a variety of content. You can mix it up. So those are the two that I like best. There's another one that's called Breathe. It's just called Breathe. And that'll just help you take a breath in, take a breath out. So if it's hard for you to hang out with that, and really kind of, you have to retrain your muscles, and women in particular, we've been taught to suck it in. We have to let it out and just kind of let those muscles hang out, or you won't get the breath down far enough. So this app just kind of works with helping you develop those muscles, both the emotional muscle, the neurological muscle, but also the physical chest muscles too. So those are my top two picks in terms of resources. I think kind of to the point here, Gail, I'm glad you brought up these other methodologies, because we tend to think of getting out of that anxiety state as requiring, now people are saying you've got to do yoga, you've got to meditate. And if what you're needing, if really what you're needing is just to calm down, that's great. Sometimes if you think about it, if your body is gearing up to fight or to flee, sometimes you need to expend those neurohormones. You need to do something for your body to release that. And I don't like when people talk about energy, because you're like, well, what the heck is that? I mean, this is literal, like our brains have prepared us for a particular function. If I'm going to flee and I'm breathing from here to here, sometimes I need to do something that feels like running. So here's another hack that you can do. I learned this recently. Those of you who go to the gym or used to go to the gym or work out, if you work out with some regularity and you're going to the gym, and especially if you're doing something that's, weight bearing or weights or resistance training, you will over time build your strength by roughly about 30%. If you visualize going to the gym regularly and visualize yourself doing the exercises, and that means taking a chunk of time to do it. But if you do that with regularity, you will increase your strength by 13.5% by imagining it.
Great.
And it was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, I get up in the morning and I could just be lying in bed and imagining that I'm running and I'm going to get the same. What am I doing? So I thought that was fabulous. So I looked into it further, and yes, indeed, there appears to be good research that supports this. So visualization is pretty profound. Why? Well, if we think about it for these purposes, our motor cortex, right, which governs movement, obviously, our motor cortex does not care if what we're doing is real or imagined. Now, my cardiac system needs other things might need it, you know, certain little hot spots on my body that I want, you know. But in terms of my nervous system, it could not care less if it's real or imagined. So, of course, if you're feeling that anxiety, and I've done this a lot with people recently, and they will sit in a chair and either physically, and you don't even have to get up if you don't want to, right? Again, you're thinking about people who are maybe on a break for a few minutes at work. You can't necessarily go for a run. If you can get out and walk or run, that's best. If you can't, if you're moving your feet, great. If you can't, if you can imagine yourself blasting off somewhere. And some people have said, well, I don't like to run, but I do like to swim. Great, imaginally hop in the pool off, you know, we did this earlier, just keep swimming, right? So you can do that. That really works as well. So running in your mind's eye, being able to take a walk, getting away from a situation, getting out of your house, imagining being able to swim or do something active is great for that fight or flight reflex. I have one guy I'm working with who is a trader, you know, he works for the stock exchange still, and he's got so much pent-up aggravation that I have recommended that once a day at least he goes off somewhere and he just shadow boxes. He's got so much fight energy right now that isn't, and it's not energy, it's real literal release of neurohormones. This guy needs to go and shadow box somebody because otherwise he's going to punch somebody in the grocery store. You know, I mean, he's like, right? So the point is, for some people, you need meditation. And I would argue at different points, we probably need each of these, right? So maybe what is happening at some of the fitness places in Park Ridge and in the chamber membership, those are great places to hop on and see, can you do a class online? Can you stream with them? Wonderful. For my son, I got him, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a streaming service where they are doing boxing, right? Because he just needs that. You know, he's 16, he needs to be moving more. And, you know, he's got his weights, he's got other stuff, but he needs something where he is like, you know, think about it. A fight reflex isn't this. It's not this, it's not this. A fight reflex is like this. So for him, that's great. But we're also working on do it imaginally. Don't go up and sock your brother. You know, here's some good things you can do. So your brain might need each of those. So the invitation is practice each of them. See which works for you and at what time. In the middle of the night, you probably don't want to be doing that, right? At work, that's a little tricky. But taking breaths, doing things that calm your nervous system, wonderful. But if you still feel some agitation, you know, can you take a bathroom break? And for 30 seconds, I kid you not, imagine that you are absolutely blasting off down the road, or you're in the pool, or you can shadow box in a stall or whatever. These are just quick ways to remind your system that you're okay. Now, while you're doing these things, even if it's exercise, you still want to be making sure you're getting the deep breath and you remind yourself that you're grounded, because for some people, these nervous system responses, once you start engaging them, can flip into higher gear. So it's just a warning label, like make sure you're breathing, make sure you continue to feel your feet. You're still fine. You're looking around. I'm in a bathroom stall, even though I'm punching, or, you know, whatever you're doing. So if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please let me know. You can just email me through info@thejunipercenter.com. It's just a mailbox where you can send a question. If you have something more that you think of or other resources you'd like, please let me know. We are here. We've been in Park Ridge for, I don't know, since 1994, so a little while. So, all right, everybody, if there's nothing else, I will leave you to your day. Thank you for joining me. It was nice to spend this time with you, and hopefully we'll stay connected.
Thank you, Margo.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good to see everybody.